The first thing I remember is the sound of my own veil tearing. Not the vows, not the music, not the pastor's voice. Just that sharp, ugly rip as lace caught on the stall door and shredded while I hauled myself up onto the mare's back with shaking hands. "Come on, girl, please," I whispered, fingers fumbling with the reins. The moon was thin and high over Hart Ranch, dusk glowing silver on the yard. The house behind me blazed with light, every window golden, every lantern turned up to bright, like the whole place was celebrating what I was about to throw away. My wedding night. My escape. I kicked my bare feet into the mare's sides. No boots, no riding skirt, just the bottom half of a wide dress, mud and straw clinging to the hem. The horse surged forward, and the torn veil slipped from my hair and vanished under her hooves. "Rose." His voice slammed into my back like a gunshot. "Silas." I didn't look over my shoulder. If I did, I knew I'd see him standing in the doorway in his dark suit, shoulders squared, jaw tight, that quiet, cold anger he never wasted on anyone but me. I leaned low over the horse's neck instead, fingers digging into her mane as we thundered past the last row of corrals and out toward the open gate. If you want to know why a woman runs from a man like Silas Hart, you should probably know this. When a man owns half the valley, he starts to believe he owns the people standing on it too. Earlier that afternoon, the town of Willow Creek had looked almost kind. Sunlight on the church steeple, children running up the steps ahead of their mamas, men in pressed shirts and clean hats, laughing as they shook hands. I'd watched it all from the church window, fingers pressed to the glass, my reflection washed pale against blue sky and dusty Main Street. The diner across from the church had its door propped open. I could see Marla, the owner, moving between tables with coffee pots, her gray-streaked braids swinging. Someone had tied a red ribbon on the feed store door. Even the sheriff's office had hung a crooked sprig of wildflowers by the window. "Your day, Rosie," Mama had whispered, fussing with the neckline of my dress. "Your fresh start. You'll see." It wasn't the first time she'd said it. It was just the first time I'd heard the tremble under her smile. "Fresh start," I repeated, watching my breath fog the glass. "Is that what we're calling it now?" Mama's hand stilled on the lace. "Don't," she said softly. "Not today." I swallowed back the words I wanted to say, that we were out of options, that the bank letters had been piling up, that the Hart Ranch foreclosure notice on our old place had felt like a noose, and smiled instead. Because that was what a good daughter did. "Sorry," I murmured. Mama stepped around so I could see her in the window. "I'm just nervous." Every bride's nervous. The lines around her eyes looked deeper in the bright light. "You'll be cared for. You won't have to worry about money, or winters, or whether there's enough feed for the stock. Silas is," she searched for the right word, "steady, powerful, cold. A man whose hands had never known calluses the way my father's had. A man who smiled with his mouth, but never with his eyes. He loves you," Mama said, as if reading my silence. I didn't say what I was thinking. Silas loved owning things. Land, horses, contracts, debts, people. He'd never once said he loved me. He'd said I was a good choice. He'd said I'd do well on his arm. He'd said our families suited each other's needs. He'd offered to clear the debt notice hanging over my family's failing ranch if I agreed to marry him. In Willow Creek, people call that generosity. Where I stood, in white lace and borrowed hope, it felt more like a trade. The church had filled slowly, the hum of voices building like bees in a hive. I remember little flashes. The pastor was practicing my name under his breath. The organist is warming up, soft and shaky. Marla from the diner smoothed her dress as she slid into a pew. Sheriff Cade was leaning against the back wall, arms folded, eyes moving over the crowd out of habit. And beside him, hat in his hands, stood a man I didn't know. Rugged, tall, sun-browned skin and a jaw that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. He kept his gaze down, thumb rubbing slow circles over the brim of his hat. Brown hair, a little too long, curled near his collar. When he finally glanced up, just for a second, his gaze swept the church, indifferent and distant until it landed on me. Our eyes met. Just once. Something softened in his expression, like dust settling after a long ride. Then he looked away, straightened his shoulders, and shifted toward the door as if he didn't intend to stay. "Who's that?" I whispered to Mama. She followed my gaze. "That's Colt Mercer. Works some of the smaller places out toward the canyon." She lowered her voice. "Keeps to himself. Good hand, though. Comes into town when he has to, then disappears again. Colt Mercer." The name brushed over me like the first cool wind before a storm. I didn't know it then, but that quiet man would become the line between the life I was running from and the life I didn't dare imagine. If the day had been about pretending, the night stripped everything bare. The ceremony blurred. I walked down the aisle. I said words someone else had written. Silas slid a ring on my finger, gold heavy and cold. When the pastor said, "You may kiss the bride," Silas's lips brushed mine for the briefest moment, polite and firm. His hand on the back of my neck never loosened. It tightened. "You're mine now," he breathed, so low no one else could hear. "Don't forget what's at stake if you embarrass me tonight." I pulled back, heart hammering. He smiled at the crowd. Something inside me cracked. Later, at the house, lanterns glowed in every window. People moved through the parlor and onto the wide front porch, music spilling everywhere. A fiddle, a guitar, laughter, the smell of roast meat and sugared cakes. It tightened, his hand on my back guiding, his voice in my ear, low and instructive. "Smile. Thank them. Don't mention your old place unless they ask. Let them see you're happy to be a Hart." When I stepped wrong in my new shoes and almost tripped over the train of my dress, his fingers dug in hard. "Careful," he murmured with that same smile. "You don't want to look clumsy in front of everyone, do you?" "I'm just tired," I whispered. "Then stand up straighter," he said. "It's one night, Rose. You can behave for one night." I nodded, cheeks burning. Out past the yard, I could see stars beginning to prick holes in the dark. The barn stood quiet, a shadow against the land. Beyond that, hills rolled away toward the canyon country, miles of scrub and rock and sky. Freedom or danger, maybe both. Sheriff Cade stopped by to offer his congratulations, his hat dipped low. "If you need anything," he said, giving Silas a pointed look, "you know how to find me." "I won't," Silas said smoothly, his hand tightening on my waist. "My bride has everything she needs right here." Cade's eyes flicked to me, question hidden in them. I held his gaze for half a second, then looked down. I wish I'd said something then. I wish I'd been brave when the music was still playing and everyone was still watching. But the truth is, sometimes courage doesn't come when the room is bright and you're surrounded by people. Sometimes it doesn't show up until you're standing alone in the dark, with straw under your bare feet and your heart beating loud enough to drown out the sound of your own fear. I slipped away after the cake. Everyone was busy. Silas was talking business with a pair of neighboring ranchers. Mama was laughing too loudly with the pastor's wife. The band had just started another song. I eased through the side door, skirts gathered in my fists, and crossed the shadowed edge of the yard, heading for the barn. I don't know if you've ever felt a moment where your whole life narrows to one fragile, breakable choice. That was mine. Behind the barn, I stopped, pressing my palms against the rough boards, trying to steady my breathing. "You all right, ma'am?" The voice came from the dark just beyond the corner of the building. I startled, spinning around. A man stepped into the slant of lantern light spilling from the house yard, hat low, shoulders broad, coat dusty from the road. Colt Mercer. I recognized him from the church. That quiet, steady gaze. He'd changed into a cleaner shirt, but the canyon dust still clung to his boots. My mouth went dry. I just needed some air. He looked past me, toward the bright house and the open door, then back at me. His gaze swept over my dress, taking in the smudge of dirt on the hem and the way my fingers twisted in the fabric. "Big night," he said finally, voice low. Crowds can choke a person. Something in his tone told me he understood more than he was saying. A shout came from the front porch. "Someone is calling for the bride." For me, I flinched. Colt's eyes sharpened, just a little. "You headed somewhere?" he asked quietly. I swallowed. "Just thinking." His gaze slid to the barn door. The latch had a new padlock on it, Silas's idea after a stable hand had gone missing months back. I'd heard him say you could never be too careful with hired men who didn't know their place. The lock was open now, hanging loose. The key sat in it, forgotten, almost like an invitation. Or a test. Colt stepped past me, fingers brushing the latch. For a long second, he just held it, head tilted, listening to the party noise floating from the house. Then he slid the lock free and let the door swing open an inch. The shadows inside gaped wide. "Sometimes," he said quietly, not looking at me, "when you can't breathe where you are, you gotta move your boots somewhere else. Even if people talk." My throat tightened. He stepped back, leaving the way clear. I don't know if he knew what he was doing. I don't know if he guessed. All I know is that in that second, with music and laughter and my own fear pounding in my ears, a cowboy I didn't know moved his hand just enough to give me a way out. A small protective act. Quiet. Practical. No questions. "Thank you," I whispered. He tipped his hat, eyes shadowed. "You didn't say what for." Then he turned and walked away into the dark. Once he was gone, everything moved fast. I slipped into the barn and shut the door behind me, fumbling in the dark for a lantern. The smell of hay and horses wrapped around me like an old, familiar blanket. My hands stopped shaking long enough to find my mare's stall. "Hey, girl," I breathed, pressing my face to her neck. "It's just us now." I left it hanging there. My veil snagged on the stall door as I opened it, ripping down the middle. I grabbed the first saddle I could reach. It didn't fit right over the dress, but I wrestled it into place anyway, tying off the girth with numb fingers. A pair of old reins lay coiled on a hook. I looped them over the mare's ears and led her out into the yard. Voices drifted on the breeze. Laughter. Someone is calling my name through the open windows. "If you go back now, you can still fix this," a small voice whispered inside me. "You can smile. You can apologize. You can let him own you. And maybe he'll be kind." Another voice, louder this time, answered, "He will own everything, your land, your body, your future. And kindness is not in his nature." I swung up into the saddle, dress tearing further. My bare feet found the stirrups, cold metal biting my skin. I leaned forward, heart lodged in my throat. Then I rode. We shot across the yard, past the last lantern's reach, toward the open gate. That was when Silas's voice split the night. "Rose." I heard the slam of the front door, the scrape of his boots on the porch boards. The party music faltered. People spilled out to see what was happening. I didn't look back. The mare's hooves pounded the hard-packed drive, scattering gravel. The open gate loomed ahead, the darker dark of the road beyond. I could feel my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. Just before we passed through, I saw a figure standing by the fence line in the shadows. Tall, hat pulled low, hands resting on the top rail. Colt. He didn't move to stop me, didn't call out. He just reached out as we thundered past and swung the gate a little wider, saving my mare from slamming her shoulder on the post. Another quiet, simple act of protection. Then we were through, and the ranch fell away behind us. The road narrowed as we left the Hart property, ruts cutting through dry dirt. The land opened up into rolling hills, sagebrush, and scrub-picking silver lines under the moon. I urged the mare faster. Wind tore at my hair. The night swallowed the last strains of music. For a moment, I almost believed I'd mated, that I could ride straight into some new life where no one knew my name, where my family's debts weren't hanging over us like a storm cloud. Then the gunshot cracked the air behind me. The mare shied, nearly unseating me. I hauled on the reins, heart in my throat, and risked a glance back. Silas stood in the middle of the drive, pistol pointed up, smoke curling from the barrel. Men gathered around him, some on horseback, some pulling on coats, all of them looking in my direction. The shot hadn't been meant for me. It was meant for attention. "Rose," his voice carried clearly and cold across the distance. "You can run if you want, but there's nowhere in this valley my men can't ride." I swallowed hard. "Keep going," I whispered to the mare, digging my heels in. We plunged into the darkness between hills. If you're listening to this and your heart's beating a little faster with mine, stay close. Because if you want to know what Silas does next and how far a man like that will go to drag a runaway bride back home, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what comes after this night. And tell me in the comments, if you were in my boots, would you have ridden out that gate? The farther we rode, the quieter the world became. The sounds of the ranch faded. No more music, no more angry shouts. Just the steady rhythm of the mare's breathing, the creak of leather, the whisper of wind over dry grass. The moon slid behind a patch of thin clouds, dimming the land. Shadows deepened in the washes and ravines. Somewhere, a coyote called lonely and sharp. I had no plan beyond a way, Away from the house. Away from his hand on my back. Away from the life that felt like a collar around my throat. But away is not the same as safe. As the miles slipped past, reality started to press in around the edges of my courage. I had no coat, no supplies, no boots. The dress that had seemed so beautiful this morning now clung heavy and cold, torn and dirty. My throat burned with thirst. I tried to remember the map Silas kept rolled out on his office wall. The Hart Ranch sat like a spider in the middle of the valley, road spinning outward. To the north lay a town. To the east, smaller spreads and the church. To the west, hills and beyond them, canyon country. I'd pointed my mare toward the dark line of those hills. Canyons, girl, I murmured. They'll have places to hide. The mare snorted, as if she had an opinion about hiding in rocks when we could be back in a warm stall. I know, I whispered, feeling tears sting the corners of my eyes. But if I go back, he'll own me, and I don't know how to be owned. People in Willow Creek would say I was ungrateful. They'd say plenty of girls would have killed for a chance to marry the richest man in the valley. A big house, good food, no more dust choking your lungs every time you clean the barn. No more counting coins to make it through winter. They wouldn't see the way Silas's gaze slid over people like they were possessions. They wouldn't hear the way he spoke when no one else was listening. Your father signed the papers, he'd said the day he brought the foreclosure notice. He knew what it meant. When he couldn't pay, your land became mine. I know, I'd whispered. And you, he'd added, gaze drifting over me in a way that made my skin crawl. Have potential, I'd echoed. A smart man, he said, protects his investments. I can solve your family's problems. Give your mother security. Keep you from breaking your back for a ranch that's already lost. In exchange for what? I'd asked, though we both knew. His smile had been slow and thin. Your hand, your loyalty, your willingness to do what's best for your family, even if it costs you something. Like my freedom, I'd murmured. Like childish notions, he'd corrected. Standing there in his office, with the foreclosure papers spread out on his desk and my father's signature already bleeding into the lines, it had felt less like a proposal and more like a sentence. Tonight, riding into the dark, I could still feel the ghost of that pen in my hand, the weight of the ring on my finger. I twisted it, tempted for one wild second to fling it into the sagebrush. I didn't. Not yet. Maybe I am ungrateful, I whispered into the night. Maybe I am foolish, but I'd rather die on my own terms than live the rest of my life doing only what's best for everyone but me. The mare's ears flicked back at the sound of my voice, as if she was listening. If you're still here, I told her softly, I guess that means you agree. The hills grew steeper as we rode. The road narrowed to more of a trail, twisting between boulders. The mare's breathing turned rougher. She stumbled once, catching herself. My own muscles screamed from riding bare-legged and tense. Up ahead, the land fell away into darkness. I slowed her, peering into the shadow. The canyon cut through the earth like someone had taken a knife to the land. I could hear the faint rush of water far below, but the moon was still behind clouds, and the edges of the drop were hard to see. Easy, I whispered, patting the mare's neck. We'll find a way around. I turned her slightly, looking for a safer path along the rim. Loose rocks shifted under her hooves. That was when thunder rolled across the hills behind us. Not weather, hoofbeats. I froze, listening. Far away, but not far enough, I heard riders. More than one. The sound echoed, bouncing off rock and sky, hard to place but coming closer. Silas's men. My heart lurched. Come on, I whispered urgently. Come on, girl. Just a little farther. I nudged the mare forward, trying to follow the faint curve of what might have been a trail along the canyon edge. The clouds thinned for a heartbeat, moonlight spilling over the rocks. I saw the drop too late. The ground crumbled under us. For one suspended, breathless second, the world tilted, the mare scrambling, my fingers clawing for something solid that wasn't there. I heard myself scream. The last thing I saw, just before the darkness swallowed me, was a flicker of light in the distance, small and warm, like a lantern in a cabin window across the canyon. And then everything went black. When I left the Hart Ranch that night, I thought I'd run alone. I didn't know that somewhere out there past the canyon and the dark, a quiet cowboy with canyon dust on his boots and grief in his eyes was about to become the only shield between the men hunting me down. If you want to know who finds me when I hit the bottom of this fall, and what he's willing to risk for a stranger in a torn wedding dress, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss. I woke up to the sound of my own heartbeat. It was loud, too loud, pounding in my ears like hooves on hard ground. For a moment, I thought I was still falling, that the earth had opened underneath me, and I was tumbling into the canyon with no bottom in sight. Then something rough brushed my cheek. Not rocks, not sagebrush, wool, a blanket. I tried to move, and pain snapped through my shoulder, wide and hot. A small broken sound slipped out of me. Easy, a man's voice said. Low, steady, close. You'll tear it worse if you keep fighting. My eyes flew open. The first thing I saw was a wooden ceiling, rough beams, smoke-stained in the corners. A lantern hung from a peg on the wall, turned low. In the dim light, the room smelled like coffee, leather, and wood smoke. The second thing I saw was him. He sat in a chair pulled up near the bed, elbows resting on his knees, fingers loosely laced, hat off, brown hair falling over his forehead, tired eyes, the color of dark honey, watching me carefully, as if I might bolt off the mattress. The canyon cowboy who'd opened the barn door and widened the gate. I started, then winced as my throat scraped dry. You're here. One corner of his mouth twitched like it wanted to be a smile and thought better of it. That's my line, he said quietly. You're the one who fell into my canyon. Memories came back in broken pieces. The canyon edge. The ground is crumbling. The mare is scrambling under me, her desperate whinny. The weightless feeling as we slid. I fell, I whispered, panic rising in my chest. My horse swears she's fine. Colt's voice cut clean through the fear. Scared, but fine. Got herself wedged on a ledge. I had to do some sweet talking to keep her from taking us both down with her. But she's out back now, nosing through my hay like she owns the place. My whole body sagged with relief, and the motion sent another spike of pain through my shoulder. I sucked in a sharp breath. His gaze flicked to the arm cradled against my chest, bound in a makeshift sling. Dislocated, he said. Not broken. I put it back in. He nodded toward the far side of the room. You fainted halfway through. Can't say I blame you. I swallowed bile. The thought of that was almost enough to make me faint again. How did you even find me? I asked. He leaned back in the chair, eyes drifting briefly toward the single small window. A faint gray light seeped through it. It was either almost dawn or late in the day. I had no idea how long I'd been out. Storm's coming, he said. Air gets a certain taste before it rolls in through the canyon. I was bringing the goats in when I heard a horse screaming. His jaw tightened. Not a sound you ignore. Followed it. Found your mare twisted up on the edge of a drop, and you lying a few feet away trying to bleed into my rocks. I looked down. Someone had cleaned the blood from my face and hair. There was a strip of cloth tied around my upper arm, and another bandage at my hairline. My once white wedding dress was dirty, ripped, and covered by a thick gray blanket that smelled faintly of cedar. Oh, I said weakly. Sorry about your rocks. He huffed out something that almost sounded like a laugh. I've seen worse on them, he said. At least you apologized. Now that the first wave of panic was fading, the rest of the room started to come into focus. It was small, a single open space with a narrow bed, a rough-hewn table, a wood stove, and a simple shelf packed with supplies. A pair of worn boots sat by the door. A rifle leaned against the wall near the window. A kettle steamed on top of the stove, and I could smell coffee and something like stew lingering in the air. Outside, the wind brushed against the cabin boards, making them creak softly. Somewhere nearby, a horse snorted and stamped. This was no big ranch house with polished floors and chandeliers in every window. This was a place built by a man who lived close to the land and expected it not to be gentle. How long have I been here? I asked. Since late last night, he said. You were out cold when I dragged you up. Fever hit a few hours after I reset your arm. Broke just before dawn. Fever, resetting bones, dragging me up from the canyon edge. I'm sorry, I said again, stupidly. He frowned. For what? For falling into your canyon? Bleeding on your floor? Making you reset my arm? I don't know. All of it. His gaze held mine for a moment, steady and unreadable. I'd be more worried about apologizing to whoever pushed you hard enough to make you ride that far, dressed like that, in the dark, he said quietly. Heat rushed to my cheeks. I reached up instinctively with my good hand to touch my hair and winced as my fingers brushed stiff, tangled curls. A few bedraggled flowers still clung there. I could feel the sticky ghost of where a veil had been pinned. The ring on my finger glinted in the lamplight. Colt's gaze flicked down to it. I curled my hand into a fist, shoving it under the blanket. I'm not married, I blurted. One eyebrow lifted the slightest bit. Funny, he said mildly. That rock on your hand says otherwise. It's complicated, I murmured. Complicated's one word for running half the night in a wedding dress, he said. What's your name? The question hit me harder than it should have. Rose. Rose Hart now. On paper. Rose Whitaker by birth. Silas's bride. The runaway. My mind scrambled for something that would protect me. Something that felt enough like the truth to sit on my tongue without choking me. Our Ruth, I said. The lie tasted strange, but not impossible. Ruth wasn't far from Rose. Biblical, simple, common enough. His eyes narrowed slightly, just for a second, as if he heard the stutter, as if he recognized the way my gaze slid away. But he let it go. All right, Ruth, he said slowly. You hungry? Protector beat practical, quiet care. My stomach answered before I could. It growled loud enough to make both of us pause. Colt pushed himself up from the chair with an easy, controlled movement. He moved like a man whose body knew hard work without complaint, no wasted steps, no unnecessary flourishes. I'll take that as a yes, he said. He crossed to the stove, lifted the lid on a dented pot, and stirred. The soft clink of the spoon against the metal and the smell of warm broth made my eyes sting unexpectedly. He didn't pepper me with questions. He didn't stand over me and demand explanations. He just poured some stew into a chip bowl, sliced a piece of the rough brown bread on the table, and brought both over, setting them on a crate pulled close to the bed. You can probably sit up if you go slow, he said. But don't use that shoulder. I'll help. He slid an arm behind my back, warm and solid through the blanket, and lifted gently. The movement tugged at every sore muscle, but he moved patiently, letting me breathe through it, adjusting his grip so my injured arm stayed close and safe. Good? He asked, once I was propped against the headboard. Yes, I whispered. He handed me the spoon, and for a moment the whole world shrank to something simple, the steam rising from the bowl. The way the metal felt cool in my hand, the kindness of being fed when I hadn't known if I'd even wake up again. The stew was simple. Potatoes, carrots, bits of meat in a thin, savory broth. It tasted like the best thing I'd ever eaten. You'll feel worse before you feel better, Colt said quietly, settling back into his chair. Body's been through a shock, but you're not broken. That counts for something. Thank you, I said, my voice rough. He shrugged one shoulder, looking at the fire. There's not much traffic out this way, he said. Figured if I didn't go see what that noise was, nobody would. He didn't say what that meant, that if he hadn't gone, I might still be lying on that ledge, or I might not be lying anywhere at all. I stared down into the stew, emotions tangling inside me. Gratitude, fear, shame, the dizzy, unreal feeling of being in a stranger's home, wearing what was left of my wedding dress, pretending to be a woman named Ruth. You could have left me, I murmured. He snorted softly. Could have, he agreed. Wouldn't have slept much afterward. Silence stretched between us. Not uncomfortable exactly, but heavy. The kind of quiet where both people know there are things to say and are deciding whether they're brave enough to say them. Do you always bring strangers home? I asked finally, trying to sound lighter than I felt. He glanced at me, one brow raised. Only the ones who fall off cliffs, he said, and even then, I try to be selective. I laughed softly, then winced as my ribs protested. You live out here alone? I asked. Most days. His gaze drifted to the window again. Got some goats, a horse or two. Canyon walls don't talk much, but they don't lie either. That's more than I can say for some folks in town. There was something there hurt, old, and deep hidden under the dry humor. I held on to it, filed it away. Do you go to Willow Creek often? I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. Often enough, he said. Supplies. Work when it's there. Pastor guilt trips me into sitting through a sermon now and then. You were at the church yesterday, I said softly, then immediately wished I could grab the words and stuff them back into my mouth. His eyes flicked to mine. Was I? He asked. You were in the back, I said, trapped now. By the door. You left before the ceremony was over. His gaze held mine for a long moment, something sharp and assessing in it. Funny thing for a stranger to notice, he said quietly, especially a stranger who claims she's not married, but woke up in my bed wearing a torn wedding dress from the biggest ranch in the valley. My heart dropped. He'd noticed more than I'd hoped. I started, then stopped. It's not what it looks like. The way I see it, he said slowly. You're either some poor girl who got roped into something she didn't want, or you're trouble looking to land in someone else's lap. I set the spoon down, hands shaking. Maybe I'm both, I whispered. His eyes softened. Just a fraction. You planning on telling me which part weighs heavier? He asked. I looked away, staring at the knot in the wooden wall above the stove. I was supposed to marry a man I don't love, I said finally. A man who owns everything and everyone around him, and calls it generosity. My family owes him more than we can pay. He called what he did for us a favor. Silas Hart, Colt said, not a question. The name hung in the air like smoke. Yes, I breathed. He leaned back, jaw tight. Figures. You know him? I asked. Everyone in this valley knows him, he said. Some owe him, some work for him, some disappear after he takes an interest. The word sent a chill down my spine. Disappear, I echoed. A muscle jumped in his jaw. Eat your stew, he said, deflecting. You're gonna need your strength if you plan on telling the rest of this story. I didn't get a chance. The sound reached us at the same time, the distant thud of hooves on packed earth, carried through the canyon like a warning. Colt's head snapped toward the window. He stood in one smooth motion, crossing the room to blow out the lantern. The cabin plunged into a dim gray half-light. What? I started. Quiet, he said sharply. Not unkind, just urgent. He moved to the window, lifting the edge of the curtain with 2 fingers to peer out. Riders, he murmured. 3 of them, coming down the trail that leads past here. My whole body went cold. Silas, or his man, they couldn't know I was here. They couldn't. I'd ridden hard. I'd fallen. I disappeared into the rocks. Surely they'd think I was dead, or lost, or... Get down, Colt said, turning back to me. Off the bed. The other side. Stay low. Pain screamed through my shoulder as I tried to move. Colt cursed under his breath, crossed the room in 2 steps, and slid his arms under me, one behind my back, one beneath my knees. He lifted me like I weighed nothing. My breath caught. He was warm, solid, smelled like sweat, leather, and wood smoke. I whispered. Not fast enough, he muttered. He lowered me to the floor on the far side of the bed, tucking the blanket around me, then dragged an old trunk closer so it blocked some of the view from the door. Stay quiet, he said, voice low and firm. Don't move unless I tell you to. What if it's him? I whispered. His eyes met mine in the dim light. Then I especially need you to stay put, he said. I don't take kindly to men who think they own what they ain't earned. He straightened, grabbed his hat, and settled it on his head in one practiced motion. For a heartbeat, his hand hovered over the rifle against the wall. He didn't take it. Instead, he walked to the door and opened it just as the hoofbeats drew near. Cold air rushed in, full of dust and the metallic scent of a storm building somewhere far off. I lay still, every muscle tense, listening. Morning, Mercer. The voice outside was unfamiliar, rough, confident, with a lazy edge. Heard you liked your privacy, but we figured you wouldn't mind a little company. Colt's answer came slowly and dry. Can't say I planned on visitors, he said. But you've ridden all the way out. Seems rude to slam the door. The man laughed. Boots crunched on the ground outside. I could picture them. 3 riders pulling up, reins in hand, eyes scanning. What brings heart-wrenched business all the way to my corner of the rock pile? Colt asked. My heart thudded at the name. We're looking for something, the man drawled. Or rather, someone. I'm not much good at hide and seek, Colt said. Canyon's big. My eyes ain't that sharp, that's so. Another voice chimed in. Younger, sharper. Funny, 'cause word in town is you've got eyes in places nobody else does, Colt didn't answer that. The first man spoke again. Silas Hart's bride decided to go for a little moonlight ride last night, he said. Took off before the I do turned cold. You see anything like that, Mercer? Woman in white, tearing across the hills like the devil's on her heels. My chest tightened so hard it hurt. Colt let a bead of silence stretch. Nope, he said finally. Can't say I've seen any brides tonight, or last night, or in the last year, for that matter. The younger man snorted. You live out here, don't you? He said. Canyon like this. If someone fell, you'd be the first to know. Maybe. Colt said. Maybe not. Canyons swallow things all the time. Rocks, stormwater, noise. Best not to bother them unless you've got to. Silas is offering good money for anyone who finds her, the first man said. Alive or not. Says she belongs to him either way. Papers signed. Deal's done. I squeezed my eyes shut. Belongs to him. The words made my skin crawl. Inside the cabin, Colt was quiet so long I thought maybe my heart had stopped. I didn't realize people work like cattle now, he said at last, voice flat. Brand 'em, own 'em, send riders out to round 'em up. The younger man snickered. You've been living under a rock, Mercer, he said. If a woman runs out on Silas on their wedding night, that's not just embarrassment. That's theft. She's walking away with his property on her finger. He jerked his chin, probably gesturing at an invisible ring. The ring on my hand suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. She's not walking away with anything, Colt said. She's walking away from someone. That's different. My breath caught. There was a pause. I pictured the riders exchanging glances. You sure you ain't seen her? The first man asked again, more pointed now. Rich-looking dress, dark hair. Might have been bleeding. Might still be. Colt's boots creaked on the porch boards. I see a lot of canyon in my own shadow, he said. Don't recall seeing anyone matching that description. You find her. You tell her from me that if she managed to make it out past that ranch gate, she ought to keep riding. The younger man let out a low whistle. You're always this brave when you're talking about Silas's business? He asked. Not brave. Colt's voice didn't change. Just not scared. Maybe you should be, the first man said softly. He doesn't like people getting in the way of what he owns. We're still talking about a woman, right? Colt asked. 'Cause you keep saying what instead of who. Leather creaked. Someone shifted in the saddle. Finally, the first man spat into the dirt. You see anything? He said, the lazy edge of his voice gone now. You ride to Hart Ranch. Fast. Silas'll remember who helped him. And who didn't. I'm sure he will. Colt said calmly. Hooves turned in the dirt. The sound grew fainter as the riders urged their horses away from the cabin, up the trail, and out along the canyon rim. I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until the last echo faded and my lungs seized. I gulped air quietly, blinking up at the underside of the bed. The door shut with a quiet click. Bootsteps crossed the floor. Colt moved the trunk aside and looked down at me. You all right? He asked. I stared up at him. Throat thick. You lied, I whispered. He tipped his head slightly. Seems like that's your department, he said mildly. Ruth. Heat flushed my face. I'm sorry, I blurted. He held up a hand. Save it, he said. You're hurt. You're scared. You ran from a man who sends riders out in the middle of the night to bring his bride back alive or not. His jaw tightened. You don't owe me an explanation yet. I swallowed. But, he added, you do owe yourself the truth, even if you don't say it out loud. He helped me back onto the bed, more gently this time, as if the confrontation had knocked some of the sharp edges off both of us. Once I was settled, he dragged the chair closer again and sat, hat still on his head. His gaze drifted to my hands. Slowly, deliberately, I slid the ring off my finger. The gold was warm from my skin, heavy in my palm. The stone glittered in the low light, mocking. I stared at it for a long moment, then tightened my fist around it. I don't know what to do with this, I whispered. Keep it, he said quietly, surprising me. For now. I looked up. Why? I asked. I hate everything it stands for. You might need proof one day, he said. Proof that you were there. Proof that you left. Proof that what he did wasn't kindness, it was control. Men like Silas twist stories. They make people doubt their own memories. Paper can get burnt. Voices can be bought. But this, he nodded at my closed fist. He gave you that because he thought he owned you. One day, you might show it to someone and tell the truth instead. My eyes burned. You talk like you've seen this before, I said softly. He stared at the floorboards for a moment, thumb rubbing slowly along the arm of the chair. I've seen what happens when a man thinks he owns people, he said. My brother worked for Silas. The words hung there heavy. He went missing 2 years ago, Colt continued, voice steady but low. Last seen riding fence line on one of Hart's outlying properties. Silas said he must have gotten himself lost or run off. His mouth twisted. My brother didn't get lost. And if he ran, he'd have told me. I swallowed. I'm sorry, I said. He nodded once. I've been looking for answers ever since. Folks don't like questions about missing men where Silas is involved. A quiet settled between us again, but this one felt different. Not empty. Filled with things we were both starting to understand. Silas wasn't just a powerful man with a temper and money. He was a threat wrapped in respectability. And Colt Mercer was more than a quiet cowboy who liked his privacy. He was a man who'd already lost something to Silas's reach and was still standing. Why did you lie for me? I asked. His gaze came back to mine steady. Because, he said simply, nobody belongs to a man who sends riders out to bring her back alive or not. My throat closed up. Thank you, I whispered again. He shifted in the chair, suddenly a little restless. Don't thank me yet, he said. You stay here. You're putting a target on this cabin. On me. On anyone who happens to stop by. Men like Silas don't stop looking just because you fell off his map. I curled my fingers tighter around the ring. I don't want to bring you trouble, I murmured. He huffed out a soft, humorless breath. Trouble was already here, he said. You just gave it a name. If you're listening to this and feeling that tight knot in your chest, the one that comes when someone finally believes you, even a little, hold on to that. Because if you want to hear how far Colt is willing to go to keep lying to men like Silas, and how long I can keep lying to him about who I am, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next turn in this canyon. And tell me in the comments, if a stranger risked himself to lie for you like this, would you tell him the whole truth, or keep holding back? The rest of the day passed in small pieces. Colt checked my bandages. He made more coffee. He stepped outside now and then, the door opening and closing with a soft thump, letting in brief breaths of cold air and the sound of his boots on the packed dirt. From the bed, I could hear him moving around the small yard, murmuring to the mare, clucking at his goats, chopping wood. Ordinary sounds that somehow made the strangeness of my own situation feel less like a nightmare and more like a new, fragile reality. At one point, he came back in with my saddle draped over his arm. This yours? He asked. I nodded, then blinked. Embroidered on the worn leather near the skirt was a small faded W. My father's, I said softly. Whitaker Ranch. Before the debt. Before the papers. Before Silas. Colt ran a hand over the letters. Thought it looked like a family stamp, he said. You're not the first Whitaker Hart's tangled with. Pain flared in my chest that had nothing to do with my shoulder. My daddy thought he could manage the numbers, I murmured. Thought a small loan would keep us afloat till the next good season. I laughed bitterly. Turns out, getting in debt to the richest men in the valley is not the same as getting help from a neighbor. Colt set the saddle against the wall carefully. Debt's a leash, he said. Some folks give you a little slack, let you breathe. Some start yanking the second you forget who's holding the end. He started yanking when Daddy got sick, I said. And when Daddy died, he looked at me like I was something he could use to balance the books. Colt's jaw clenched. Men like that don't understand what it means to protect anything but themselves, he said. His words sank deep. Protect. It was a simple word, but sitting in that little cabin, listening to the storm building outside, and his quiet movements inside, it slowly began to attach itself to him in my mind. Not because he'd promised anything, not because he'd said he'd keep me safe, but because he'd acted like my safety mattered, even before he knew my full name. By late afternoon, clouds had gathered thick over the canyon, dark and heavy. The wind picked up, rattling the shutters. Colt added more wood to the stove, the fire crackling brighter. You'll need to stay at least a couple of days, he said finally, as if we'd been circling that decision all along. Until you can sit on a horse without falling off again. After that, we'll figure out where you go. Where could I go? I asked quietly. If I go back to town, he'll find me. If I ride out of the valley, his men will be watching the roads. There are other canyons, he said. Other towns. Rivers that don't run through Silas's land. You're not trapped just because he says so. It feels like I am, I whispered. He didn't argue with that. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small and folded. He held it out to me. What's that? I asked. Fell out of your dress when I was trying not to drop you, he said. Figured if it mattered, you'd want it back. I took it carefully with my good hand and unfolded it. The paper was creased, edges softened from being opened many times. It was a letter from the bank, printed neatly and impersonally. The words blurred together, but I knew them by heart. I'd tucked it into my bodice that morning before the wedding, as if keeping the worst of it close to my skin would somehow make it less real. I thought if I married him, we'd get a new letter, I said, voice shaking. One that said paid, cleared, safe. Instead of all this, Colt's gaze moved over the words. He's got a pattern, he said quietly. Same handwriting at the bottom as on the letters my brother showed me. You saw them? I asked. He nodded. My brother didn't want me to worry, he said. Kept telling me it was manageable. That Silas was a good businessman. That interest was just how things worked now. His jaw tightened. Next thing I know, my brother is working longer hours for less pay and writing fence lines on land that didn't he feel right. What do you mean? Didn't feel right? I asked. Land that should have belonged to other folks, he said. Land nobody remembers selling. Land where people start whispering about missing cattle and missing men. A shiver ran down my spine. So he uses debt to get land, I said slowly. Uses land to get men. And anyone who steps outside the pattern disappears. Colt nodded once. And now he's added marriage to the mix, he said. New kind of contract. New kind of leverage. I stared at the letter. Do you think I made it worse by running? I asked, tears burning hot. For Mama? For anyone who owes him? Colt leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes locked on mine. You didn't make anything worse, he said. You just stopped playing the part he wrote for you. That doesn't cause the rot. It just shines light on where it's been all along. The words hit something deep inside me, like opening a window in a room I'd forgotten was dark. Thank you, I whispered. Don't thank me yet, he said again. Storm still coming, as if on cue. Thunder rolled somewhere far off, low and distant. Night fell early with the storm clouds. Colt lit the lantern again, turning it low, and checked the cabin door latch twice. He moved with a quiet, watchful tension now, as if some part of him had stepped fully into alert mode when those riders appeared and hadn't he stepped back out. I'm gonna walk the line, he said after a while. The line? I asked. Path I used to check the edge of the canyon near the cabin, he said. Storm's kicking up wind. Rocks shift. The last thing we need is another surprise slide taking out my goat pen. And people? I asked softly. He gave me a look that said I'd answered my own question. If you hear voices that aren't mine, he added, you know what to do. Hide, I said. And stay that way, he said. He picked up his hat and a thin leather coat, shrugged it on, and stepped out into the wind. For a long time, I listened to his boots crunching around the cabin, fading and returning as he moved along some path I couldn't see. Now and then, the wind brought the faint sound of his voice talking to the horse or cursing at a stubborn gate. Slowly, my eyes grew heavy. Just as I started to drift, the door opened again. I jerked, heart skipping. Colt stepped inside, dusted with fine grit, hair tousled from the wind. He shut the door quickly, leaning his back against it for a moment. You okay? I asked. Yeah, he said, but his eyes were darker than before. Storm's coming in stronger than I thought. You'll hear it when it hits the canyon. Nothing sleeps much when that happens. He hung his coat, then reached into his pocket and pulled something out. He set it on the table near the bed. It was a small, twisted piece of metal. A horseshoe nail. I frowned. That from your mare? I asked. No, he said quietly. Her shoes are worn, but not like that. He picked up the nail again, turning it in the lantern light. This one's new, he said. Sharp. Came out of a fresh track near the canyon edge. The same kind of shoe I found marks of the night my brother went missing. A chill slid down my spine. So, I asked. So someone's been riding close to this cabin, he said. Someone with the same kind of horseshoes as Hart's men. And they weren't on the main trail. My heartbeat sped up again. You think they know you helped me? I whispered. He shook his head slowly. I don't know what they know, he said. But I do know this. You're not the only one Silas has been circling. And if his riders are learning these canyons the way I do. He set the nail back down, the tiny clink louder than it should have been in the quiet room. Then this won't be the last time we hear them in the dark. He looked at me, eyes steady, jaw set. Get some rest, Rose, he said softly. I froze. He didn't say Ruth. He said Rose, my real name. My heart stumbled. I started. You talk in your sleep, he said gently. Most folks do when they've got this much fear in them. Heat flooded my face. A mixture of embarrassment and something else. Something like relief and terror tangled together. You're not gonna throw me out? I whispered. He shook his head once. I lied to men who ride for a living today, he said. I can handle a bride on the run and the name that really belongs to her. He paused, gaze never leaving mine. But understand this, he added quietly. If you stay under my roof, I'm not just some stranger who dragged you out of a canyon. I'm in this now, whether I meant to be or not. The wind howled outside, rattling the shutters. Thunder rolled closer, echoing through the canyon walls. Inside the small cabin, his presence felt like the only solid thing in a world that had been tilting since the moment I tore my veil on the barn door. Okay, I whispered. Then I guess we're both in it. His mouth curved, the barest hint of a real smile. Guess we are, he said. He turned down the lantern just a little, letting the room slip into a warm, shadowed glow. Try to sleep, he murmured. Storm's gonna make a lot of noise, but I'll be here. Nothing's getting through that door without going through me first. I believed him. For the first time since I'd run through the ranch gate, lungs burning and heartbreaking, I let my eyes close without forcing them open again to check the dark. Outside, the wind began to roar. Inside, I listened to his steady movements, the creak of the chair as he sat back down, the quiet exhale of a man who'd just chosen with consequences he couldn't see yet. When I ran from Silas Hart, I thought I was running alone. Now I was lying in a canyon cabin, wrapped in a stranger's blanket, hiding a ring in my fist, while a cowboy who barely knew me lied to dangerous men and promised to stand between me and the storm. If you want to hear what happens when that storm finally hits, and what Colt does the first time Silas's riders come back at night, not just asking questions but looking for blood, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss episode 2.